Now, as we dive deeper into some of these different samples, you'll start to notice that working with the canvas requires a lot of code. And one of the things that's available within the API in order to make your life a little bit easier is the translate function. Now let's take a look at this image over here for a second. I've got an image on the page and then some text on top of it, which is positioned at just the right spot on the text so that it shows up right. Well, if I'm placing text or images or drawing shapes all around in my canvas, and for some reason I decide that I need to have all of that show up in a different spot on the canvas, it would require quite a bit of work in order to do all the math to make all the adjustments for each shape, for each set of text, for each image, and on for everything that's been placed on the canvas. So instead of having to do that, what I can do is use the translate function, which essentially takes the 0, 0 grid position and moves it from the top upper left-hand corner to whatever position you provide for it. So in this case, what I'll do when I uncomment this line of code is that the context will have the 0, 0 position now reposition itself at the 100, 100 position. So instead of being up here, it'll be down here around somewhere. Let me uncomment that code and you can see how it works. So now I'll refresh the page. And now when I run this, you can see that none of the code had to change in order to make the text show up on the image the same way, but the image and the text were relatively placed in the same spot because the 0, 0 position moved from being up here to now being at a point down here within the canvas. So as you begin working with Canvas, you may draw shapes in one position, the default 0, 0 position, call translate to a different place within the canvas, and then move back, all depending on what you want to render on the canvas. Another really useful function when you're using Canvas is the ability to save state. Working with state management on the canvas gives you an opportunity to make overall changes on the canvas after you've saved at a certain point and then revert back to that point. So for this demo, what I've done is gone back to the demo that I showed you before where I drew rectangles. So you notice here that I have the red rectangle, and then with the order of operations, I created this blue rectangle. Now this has the alpha transparency against it, but it's not overlapping anything, so you can't see it as well. Then, after the blue rectangle, I created the clear rect and stroked around it. What I've done though, in between the commands for the red rectangle and the blue rectangle, I've made a number of different changes to the canvas. I've called translate, rotate, and even scale. But I took a snapshot of the state of the canvas before I made any of those changes, and then reverted back to it before I worked with the clear rectangle and did the stroke. So let's take a look at the code in order to make this happen. Again, it's all exactly the same from the previous demo, except what I've done is after I created the red box, I called context.save. At this point, there's a snapshot saved within the context, and any changes I make to the context can be reverted by calling context.restore. So all the changes that I make to the context within these comments here can be undone by calling restore. After I call restore, then the commands are exactly the same in order to create the cleared box and stroking that box. The thing that's interesting though, is that the saves that you make to the context state are done in a stack. So if you call context.save more than once, and then you call restore, that first call to restore will go back to the last point in which you saved state in the context. So you could save state in the context multiple times depending on how you want to work with the context, and it'll give you an opportunity to keep the canvas formatted the way that you need it for subsequent commands.